design this presentation for the students, because I had an experience this past summer that changed my perspective on democracy, whatever you want to call it, and I'm hoping that I can share and translate some of it with you guys. You know, it's really hard to take an experience and put it into words and try and contain it within a PowerPoint presentation, but I will try and do that for you guys. How many of you guys have ever had a job or have a job that you're feeling like you're not getting paid the wage you deserve? How many of you guys have ever been fired from a job for something that you either didn't do or that you felt was an unfair reason?
I'm always getting fired, man. Always.
Labor is a central aspect in many of our problems and what's going on in today's society. A lot of the movements, the economy, all trace back to labor. Last spring, just around this time, I had an experience with labor, and it, like I said, it led me to Las Vegas, to Chicago, to Cleveland, doing labor organizing and things that I had honestly no idea about up until that point. And so I have constructed a presentation on how we as students can facilitate participatory democracy using labor as a platform and empower ourselves and students around us. Now, I thought I would start out with a definition of participatory democracy. You can look at it from many different angles, but the one I'm going to go with is one that's participatory democracy in the workplace. And so what I came up with from a book was Democratization of Industry, a political system in which all members of a firm, together with representatives of the community, participate equally in setting and agendas and determining policy decisions for the firm. And so that's kind of the context I'm going to look at it for. Participatory democracy, you can do it in any setting. We could do it in this classroom or this room right here. You can do it across campus. You can look at it from many different perspectives, and so that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to look at it in the workplace. What do you guys think when you hear democracy? What are some things that come to mind?
People.
People? All right, what else?
Debate.
Debate?
Voice.
Voting? Okay. Voting's a key one.
Voice,
Media.
which is vote.
Media.
Voice, which is voting. It's
Voice, which is voting. Okay. Because it seems like we had this thing for the people and by the people. We're all supposed to make these decisions. We all have an equal piece and putting something together, right? But then when it actually comes down to it, this is what we get. And this doesn't like represent all the people. You just have one guy signing something and
what are we looking at, Lucky?
Huh?
What are we looking at?
Oh, this right here,
For those unfamiliar.
this is just represents it. This image is actually the New Deal that they signed in 1935. I thought that was kind of go along with the theme. But we have all these ideas of democracy and what it should be about and who should represent it. But when they say by the people, when it really comes down to it, who's actually making decisions, then this is what we get. And this is what it ends up being. And I would argue that maybe this is what democracy really looks like. It's not just 12 people at a desk. It's everybody having a say and everybody coming together, not just voting. Because there's much more in a democratic system than just going out and voting and actually being an active citizen or anything. And obviously you guys probably know where this is at, in our capital. And this is kind of where I got my start. This is in my hometown, but I was up here at the time, and this is what separates democracy, which is what we saw in the last slide, from participatory democracy, was what we want to try and get towards. Let's see how I'm doing here. So last February, on the 14th, we were all in our classrooms. It was one of those moments in your life where everybody knew where they were when they heard about it. I was up here in Stout. What I'm going to look and examine democracy is in terms of the context of what happened last February and the budget bill, the SB 11, that SB 17, 11, something like 17, that was passed, and looking at that and how that affected participatory democracy, the chances of participatory democracy, and how it affected us as students. This bill was introduced without much warning, without much consideration for other people. It was just announced. Now, usually, like if we go back to what we were saying before, it's supposed to be for the people and by the people, and here was this bill that just came out of nowhere. And in the aftermath of that, we lost chances of having participatory democracy, and it was also infringed upon. There was no like debating this. Scott Walker, he basically came in and said this is how it's going to be, and there's no negotiating it, and to the point where people actually left the state, trying to hold on to the last bit of quote-unquote democracy we had. And it stripped public workers, including our teachers, of the right to collectively bargain. Which is collectively bargain. We are supposed to be one group of people, correct? We should all have a voice in bargaining and having the say in what goes on in our economy. And it also attacked education, and those are the two big things that help build this democracy. It's the ability to have labor and to have education. If you don't have either of those, then people aren't going to be able to have a say in things. If you don't have an education, if you don't have a job, those are the two biggest things right now that are crippling our society. It's the lack of education, the opportunity to get an education, and the labor associated with that, of being able to send your kids to college and being able to be a full citizen in this country. Because right now, just being a quote-unquote citizen is not enough. You have to have the money and the education. And it's very skewed as to how you can get that. So now I'm going to turn to what I experienced in a platform that we can use in facilitating this democracy and getting people back on track and getting a part of it. Because one of the things was, we had this whole thing, it wasn't the first time I ever heard about labor organizing. Labor, what are you guys doing? Who's actually familiar with unions? Like we've heard it. I heard it once. I had a job interview for this part-time cleaning job, and right in my orientation, they threw in this movie about these labor unions, and I was like convinced that they were like these like shady people that were like standing there, hey, take this thing and come over here to this thing. I didn't know what it was. They were like scamming. I thought it was like some subscription they were trying to sell you. I didn't know. They did their job. I was like, labor unions are bad. I have since changed my view. One thing I would like to point out is there's corruption everywhere. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that labor unions are just the best thing in the world. You can find corruption in every aspect. It's by humans, and by default, we are flawed. But labor unions are basically collective groups of people coming together to have a say. And whether you want to call it a union, corporations are basically the same thing. They're groups of people that come together for a profit. Labor unions are coming together for the workers, to give them a piece of the profits of the say that goes on in a business. And this is how we build that participatory democracy in the workplace. If you have the boss is going to get his word out there. He's going to set your wages. He's going to tell you when you're going to work. Ultimately, he controls your job and whatnot. But what about the workers? And we somehow got into this notion where the workers don't have a say, and you just got to kind of accept what it is. But everybody has to live, right? We all have to, at some level, have necessities, like I said, to get your education, to be able to afford things, not just a minimum wage, but a wage that can sustain of the basic necessities of life. And one of the things you hear a lot about is the myths of unions, that they're just there to scam your money, or they're these the union thugs, the classic interpretation of them. And so through my exploration, through my involvement in them, I learned a lot more about what they actually are when they are used properly. Like I said, you can always skew things one way or another. But at the core, a labor union is a group of workers that come together to bargain for and represent their voice. And I'm going to now talk about how exactly those work, like what kind of strategies that they use. In participatory democracy, it's all about integrating with each other, right, and getting to know one another. That's the key strategy here. It's relationship building. Getting to know people on a personal level and know who you are working with. That's how we are going to collectively. That's how things will ultimately work together. Is when we know where everybody's coming from. If you look at just someone at face value, I can just judge you. I can kind of look at you and say I can kind of figure out who you are. But once you get to know people, you understand where they're coming from and you understand what people's needs are. We need a whole lot more of that in this country. You can look at any issue. One of the key strategies is building those relationships and then empowering people. A lot of people aren't used to having any say in things. We go around in society every day, oh, my vote doesn't matter, I'm at work, I really don't have any say in things, I just got to do what's going on. And a lot of that is by fear tactics. Keeping people in line by the thought of losing their job, of getting fired. And that's why it's really hard to get people to step up, because a lot of times it is their jobs online. But if you're just one person, yeah, you could be fired. But if we work together, then you can bring your demands in a way that everybody's protected and everybody gets a say in it. Why students? We're the ones entering the workforce, right? Ultimately, you guys are all old. You're going to be out of here in like 3... No, I'm just kidding. We are the future. We have the ability right now, the youthful energy. If you look at any successful social movement, it was always started by it was always embodied by students. They're always the ones that have that energy and that ability to get out there. And we have so many students nowadays that are trying to find platforms or ways to get out there. This is what I would suggest. And what I'm going to do now is show you some of my experiences that I've done, like I said, across the country, working with labor union for an internship this past summer. One of the first places that I went was Las Vegas, and so I was trying to get involved, right? I was doing this Wisconsin budget battle. I'm like, yeah, I want to get activists. I want to do all these things, and they're like, so I signed with this internship with this labor union, and they're like, okay, we got these places all around the world. I'm thinking, okay, New York, DC, somewhere cool like that. And then they said Las Vegas. I was like, Las Vegas? Like, that doesn't sound, you don't get the political activist thought when you're thinking about Las Vegas. I was just thinking, damn, I was like, what? All right. But there's like a road trip out there, so I'm like, okay, I'll do it. Turns out, in retrospect, it was one of the biggest areas of labor in the country. You have these immigrant workers, many of whom may be documented, maybe not, working at these large casinos, all these millionaires, people coming out there. It's a huge economy out there. And so what I did out there is these are some of this was like the mecca of organizing. It was one of the last union strongholds out there, and they had these really militant unions involved, and we would go around to the hotels and talk with the workers and hear some of like what's going on, like, hey, they're overworking me, or this and that, and also empowering them to take responsibility for it. Because ultimately the organizers don't always work in the job, but sometimes they come from the outside, so ultimately it's up to you to take responsibility for that. And so it's empowering people, making them feel like they have a voice, and getting them to take that first step and standing up to their boss, which is hard. So if you feel like maybe you're going to get deported, or you don't speak the language as well, like they will twist all these things against you and make you just feel like shit. Like you don't have any voice in it. You can look at any place in the United States, so many marginalized people, they don't feel like they have any say in this. This is empowering them, building that relationship and saying, you do have a voice. You can stand, you can affect decisions if you work together. If I go up there right now by myself, no, it won't get done. But if we take all of us and we go to the boss, if we pack his room, like they sometimes do, 50 people in the room and say, look, this is not right, $8 an hour does not give me what I need to survive, then we have something. That is participatory democracy in the workplace. So after that month, I went over to Chicago, which was Chicago, which was a little even more different. This was in the community, and this really hit home to me. So we were doing this living wage campaign, right? And we were trying to get these airport workers better salaries. They're working $8, wanted to get them 11. All right, almost done. And so they had us doing these trainings about going knocking on these people's doors and talking about these issues of living wage. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to go to this middle class family and I'm going to talk to them. I'm sure they're going to understand this. It's going to be great. And then they drop me off on like the south side of Chicago. And I had this packet of clipboards and I didn't know the neighborhood. And I was just like, whoa. I'm black. But this was outside of what I was used to. These were hard-hit neighborhoods. And it didn't look like any of these people wanted to talk to me about anything. But they did. When we started talking about jobs, especially seeing a young person coming up to them, talking about jobs and trying to get these other people getting their wages up, it was empowering. And the more doors I knocked, the more I came to understand, like, this is the way to do it. Not to sit up in Washington and write these bills out and have these things, but getting in there and actually seeing the conditions and talking with these people. And you heard these amazing stories. We had people like 90 years old, literally, all the way down to me and Martin over here, like 21 years old, building this relationship of this community organizing. And we took about 20 people to go see this alderman in Chicago about this wage campaign to get the workers' wages up. And that was an amazing experience, especially in the context of the black culture, which I was really interested in, and talking with these old people and hearing their stories about how, what happened that we have half the young black labor force sitting on the corner, just literally a block from us up there. You just see them up there. There's people just all up there. And what happened to it? How did we deteriorate, or how did we get pulled out of this system where we're outside? You can't get a job because you got a felony. We don't even have high school educations anymore. It's about empowering people. And how did we get to that? And there's this system that's put in place to take people out of it. And it could all be addressed through this system of labor organizing and empowering people. And what I really liked about it was that we were actually there, like, in it, not sugarcoating it, not at some desk somewhere far away. We were out there in the streets. And that's what ultimately it's going to take. I know I ran out of time, so I'm just going to turn over to discussion, questions. If you guys have questions about what I was doing or questions about this in general. Ultimately, though, participatory democracy starts at the micro grassroots level in getting people to realize that they do have a say in this, and changing the theme to not just voting, but actively getting involved and building up a sense of solidarity among ourselves, and then going up from there. So thank you for your time.